Welcome to Living Lotus Yoga Online. I'm Carole. Today we are going to explore some variations of downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Shavasana. Now you may have heard that downward facing dog is a great resting pose, and while there's tons of benefits to using downward facing dog as a resting pose, there's also tons of benefits and opportunities to add a little bit of dynamic movement to your downward facing dog. So today we're going to explore some of those movements so you can add a little bit more variety and spice to both your yoga and Pilates classes. So to begin, you're going to come into downward facing dog and the modification that works for you. If you're not sure what that might be, you might like to check out our accessible downward facing dog video and then come back to this one. So the first dynamic sequence with our downward facing dog pose that we're going to come into is our three-legged down dog. This probably isn't anything new to you. I'm sure you have heard of three-legged down dog pose. What we're going to do is add a little bit of movement into this pose, creating a sequence. This sequence is really good for exploring any imbalances you might have on either side of the body. Your body's going to be very honest in letting you know where these imbalances are, and that gives you the opportunity to then work on these imbalances. It's also a great sequence to increase flexibility, strength, and range of motion in the hip of the extended leg, which will make sense as we go through it. So come on into downward facing dog pose. And then we're going to take this into our three-legged down dog by just lifting and extending one of our legs out behind us. Now you don't need to lift this leg too high. Point the toes, lengthen the leg away from you, and then all you're going to do is tap it down. We're going to bring it up, we're going to tap it down. Whilst we're doing this, we're drawing our navel back towards our spine, so core is engaged, and pressing evenly through the palms. We'll go for a few rounds here, and then we'll extend the leg out behind us, bend the knee, and now roll the hip open. So this is a really lovely little hip stretch. As we do this, we're going to notice if we're loading off onto the opposite side too much, showing us those imbalances. Let's see if we can even out the weight. Press evenly through all 3 points that are still down onto the mat. Keep that core engaged. Deep breaths. And then from here, working on some mobility through the hip of the extended leg, we're going to just take it into some hip circles. So drop the knee down, send it behind you, open to the side, and bring it back to center. As you do this, try and maintain equal weight in the 3 points on the ground. And then of course you can reverse your circles. When you're done, extend the leg, gently bring it all the way back, downward dog pose. Take a couple of rounds of breath, and that's our first sequence, three-legged down dog. The next dynamic movement we can bring into play with our downward facing dog is come on up, and simply all we're going to do is bend and lengthen our legs. So we'll inhale, bend knees, maybe little bend, maybe full bend, and we tap the mat. Exhale, press, lift up and back. As we're doing this, navel's drawn to spine, so core is engaged. This is a great opportunity to work on stabilizing and strengthening shoulders, as well as strengthening your core and increasing flexibility in the legs. We can add on to this. We can actually bring a little bit of spinal rotation work in, and that's also going to target your obliques along the side of your core here. So simply all we do for that is we'll bend the knees, not all the way to the mat this time, and then we'll dip one hip down towards the ground, little twist. As we do this, we're trying to maintain equal pressure through the palms. Keep the shoulders nice and stable. Come to center, lengthen legs. Again, little bend, and then dip the other hip down. Equal pressure through palms, come back, lengthen legs. We can do this a few times. As you come back, draw the obliques. Obliques driving the movement here, bringing our legs and knees back to center before lifting hips. The next sequence we're going to come into is targeting more of the upper body in our downward facing dog. We're actually going to stick with that spinal rotation work though, so this is upper spinal rotation work. So you're coming in to your downward facing dog, and again, this particular movement might not look like anything new. We're just going to revolve our downward facing dog. So you bring your opposite hand towards the opposite foot. So maybe it's somewhere in the middle of the mat, maybe it's reaching for the toes, the ankle, or even the back of the leg. From here, core stays strong, we're going to let go of the leg and start to rock forward slightly, and then just tap that hand towards the top of the mat. Then bring it back and tap. Trying to keep equal weight on the 3 points on the ground. And again, we're working with a little bit of spinal rotation. It's a lovely stretch for the shoulder, good stabilizing work for your shoulder, and still increasing flexibility in the legs. Sticking with the upper body, we're going to come into some downward dog shoulder mobility work. It's super strengthening still for the entire body, especially through the core. And we're keeping 3 points down onto the mat. So we'll come into downward facing dog pose, settle it in, set it up. And then you're going to bring one of the hands off of the mat and bring it to the shoulder. So we're bending the elbow here. Keep that weight even on the 3 points on the ground, core strong, and then just circles with the shoulder. So we're strengthening, we're stretching, and we're using this opportunity to do a little bit of shoulder mobility work. Now, the reason we are bringing the hand to the shoulder as opposed to lengthening the arm away from the body is because we want to focus on the movement coming from the shoulder joint. Nice circles. You can do this a few times. Replace your hand to the mat, and of course, switch it up. Everything we do on one side, we do on the other side. And the last dynamic movement we're going to explore today in our downward facing dog pose is our down dog push-up. This is a powerful pose, or a powerful exercise, I should say. Complete body strengthening, especially through the upper body and the core. And you don't need to do too many of these. So you're gonna come on up into downward dog. Now settle it in, whether that means straight legs or bent knees. We're focusing here on the crown of the head coming down towards the mat. That doesn't mean it has to meet the mat, just sending it down towards the mat. As you bend your elbows, hug them into the body, drop crown of head down, and then exhale, press it back up. Inhale, drop it down. Exhale, press it back up. So super sequence here to work on strengthening through the shoulders, especially if you are working towards any form of forearm stand. That's a really good preparatory pose or sequence. So thank you for exploring some dynamic movement in downward facing dog with me today. If you have any dynamic movement that you like to bring into your down dogs, then please share it with us. Comment on the video. Thanks for joining. Namaste.